It's interesting because there was a report in the Economic Times, Jay, that said, I just read it a couple days ago, that said JP Morgan now holds over 750 million ounces of silver. That's more than $40 billion worth, and would be, if true, the largest stockpile on the planet. It goes on to say that they have not only stopped shorting the market as of recently, but they have completely flipped and become the biggest long in the market. And it said that in 6 weeks, they added 21 million ounces while closing a 200 million ounce short position. This is the 200 million ounces was the pressure that kept the price low. When you have traders come in odd hours and dump more onto the market, it just suppresses it that much faster and triggers stops.
Andy Schectman says silver is at the start of a major move as institutions quietly accumulate physical metal and drain supply. JP Morgan's shift from short to long persistent supply deficits and record physical deliveries signal rising stress in the paper market. With the gold-silver ratio still historically high and the public largely absent, silver, especially junk silver, remains one of the best values he's seen in decades. Thanks for watching. Give a thumbs up and subscribe to Fine Metals for the latest insights.
Recently, a big silver deposit discovered. It is largely a byproduct metal of mining other metals. And have Keith Newmeyer on your show. He'll tell you that real quick. He's the CEO of First Majestic. They are the purest silver play on the market, and they only represent about 60% of what they mine being silver. They do gold and other things too that they mine, but it is an asset that is literally depleting in nature, and it's we've had between a 200 and 300 million ounce shortfall every year for the last. This will be the 6th year in a row.
Yep.
of demand outpacing supply, and that 200 to 300 million ounces also takes into account recycling, what little bit of recycling there is, and the byproduct mining. So if you were just to use the silver mining companies, they only mine about 200 million ounces a year, and where the world is asking for a billion ounces more than that. So it's an asset that is falling off in terms of its footprint geologically, and its uses are accelerating in digital, green, solar panels, photovoltaic, military applications, even monetary applications. Now it's being used as collateral in India. And, I think the realization by nations is that it's worth a lot more than the dollars that are used to purchase it or to try and describe its value. So, yeah, I think it's one of these deals where they can't just go mine more because there isn't the silver to be found. Even if you did, to your point, from drilling and discovery to permitting, which takes forever, to infrastructure, to actually digging the hole, pulling it out, finding it, pulling it out, refining it. Yeah, you're talking years and years and years. So that is one of the byproducts of a market that has been suppressed lower forever, where it killed incentive to mine. Prices were too low. And so we do have an issue as it pertains to any new mines coming online anytime soon. And exploration has been next to nothing in the silver market. So one of these deals where I just think you have to think differently, that this time it is different. It's different because this is a geopolitical deal now. This is not about a market that was trapped by the Hunt brothers with leverage because they realized that there were more paper than bars. Similar situation here in terms of more paper than bars, but the difference is this is geopolitical. I talk about how no one ever stood for delivery, right? In the first 12 days of the December delivery, which started the day after Thanksgiving, and you wonder why the servers shut down Thanksgiving night, of the 1,000 commodities traded, just happened to shut down on the metals market. The servers overheated because there was obviously a bevy of activity on Thanksgiving night, and the traders left dinner to go lock in orders. No, it was damage control. But in the first 12 days of delivery that we've seen, I haven't looked in the last 2 days, we saw 58 million ounces of silver delivered and 2.85 million ounces of gold, with contracts still being issued all all month long that can stand for delivery. But ask yourself, who's got the money to stand for delivery on 58 million ounces? But this is what we've seen every single month for the past 13 months since he won the election. Literally, this is what we've seen on every single month. 2.84 million in gold and 58 million ounces in silver just in 12 days. And of the 12 days, 4 or 5 of them were weekends. So, you're talking 6 or 7, 8 trading days, and you're seeing this kind of volume. Yeah, things are beginning to get very, very, very interesting in the market again. You got rising lease rates in London and in the U.S., all of that stuff. I don't know, man. It's things are beginning to get very interesting in the silver market, and it is because of physical delivery. It is the delivery that is overwhelming the system, and that is what is changing the narrative. For most of the people who have bought 45 to 1 would represent at least a double, because it's been abnormally skewed for the past several years. Going back to 2020, it hit 125 to 1, the all-time high. I remember the first video I did was with Bix Weir in 2010, and we were talking about how it had hit 85 to 1. It was like the second time in human history it had ever been that high. So I went on that show with him and told people, if you own gold, sell it. I'll sell it to the marketplace at an 85 to 1 ratio to silver. You can turn around and get roughly 85 ounces of silver. Now it would depend upon what kind of gold and what kind of silver, but in general, 85 to 1. So you get 85 ounces for every ounce of silver. Now remember, for 5,000, for every ounce of gold, for 5,000 years, the geologic ratio has been 16 to 1. And you go back through history, you'll see that even Isaac Newton made the currency in the mint in Great Britain 16 to 1, 16 silver to 1 gold. That had been the geological ratio forever. Now, man's ratio since the Industrial Revolution has been on average, about 45 to 1. And that was because gold was money and silver was industrial. The manipulation of the silver market, largely, I believe, by the Western military industrial complex to make high-tech weapons, has really skewed things. And when you mess with Mother Nature, she gets her vengeance, and she will. Going back to that video I did with Bix, now remember, the average has been about 42 to 45 to 1, even though the geologic ratio has been 16 to 1 for 5,000 years. It is now 7 to 1. It's depleting in nature. It's found in nature in a form called epithermal, like your skin is epidermis, very near the surface. Big deposits were found forever ago. Of the 800 plus million ounces mined last year, only about 20% came from companies that actually mine silver. I mean, let's talk about, the inflation may wake the public up. For years, the last decade or so, the U.S. has funded itself by borrowing short term. Janet Yellen wanted to move everything from long term to short term to keep the federal funds rate low. And that made it easy for Congress to run huge deficits without feeling the, immediate pain. And now you add the Genius Act, which, by tying money flows to stablecoins backed by short-term treasuries, again, it's creating artificial demand for the short end of the government debt. The reason I say this is that the interest rates aren't set by markets anymore. They're set by policy and financial engineering. The financial engineering being the Genius Act, which goes into effect no later than January 18th, 2027. It says by 18 months after enactment, which was July 18th, 2025, or 120 days after federal regulators issue final implementing regulations.
What's the best product to be getting into right now? And the answer that you had at the time was junk silver. And I think you even mentioned Eagles are always a good buy to be into. So one, with all of this action going on in silver, are you still seeing that constitutional or junk silver is the best buy? Are people
no question. In my career, I've never seen anything like it, ever, never. When you're able to buy junk silver below spot, I've never seen anything like it, ever. And it's very difficult for me to even try and contemplate why it's happening. During the pandemic, junk silver would have been between $9 and $13 over spot everywhere in the country for almost 4 years. Pendulums often swing too far to one side and definitely too far to the other side here. I think it is without question the best value, period, that I've ever seen in silver in 35 years, ever.
So we got junk silver. How about Eagles? Are they still well priced, or are they getting pricier at this time?
They are getting pricier, but I think you'll find our prices will be as good or better than anywhere in North America on them. We have sealed boxes of them, backdates that most companies charge more for in sealed boxes. I don't. And you'll get boxes from whenever, 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, it could be 2024. You go to most websites, they charge you more. I charge you less. Um, they're a great value. And again, well, I shouldn't say a great value. They're my favorite choice, typically. But when we talk about value, it's very difficult for me to ignore the value found in pre-65 silver. I've never seen anything like it. So, silver in general, I think it's just important to get into it now. I think it's really just beginning to get noticed, and the public's been out of this market completely. This is all being driven by big money. Wait till the public jumps in, and it's like adding a turbo boost to an already strong market with momentum. So whether you're buying Eagles or pre-65 or Maples or bars, it doesn't matter what you're buying. You just get something while you can if you don't own any. And I will tell you, I've never seen an environment like this where the biggest money in the world is buying it hand over fist, and it hasn't translated yet into the retail market, as the public is enamored with equities, as evidenced by their all-time highest position in equities, mom and pop retail, all-time highest position in margin debt at $1.5 trillion, nearly an all-time high in options exposure. So the public is all in on leverage and speculation, as the big smart money has been draining the COMEX, and it hasn't spilled over to the retail market. This is great value everywhere, all the time. A lot of times it happens in very thinly traded markets, where they'll dump it in the access market overnight, and they'll dump paper contracts. You see, what's different now is that no one ever stood for delivery on these exchanges, and so they could paper manipulate it by selling paper contracts at a level that would overwhelm the longs. And they would continue to sell and drive down the paper price until the longs would capitulate and sell. And they would then be able to cover those positions very easily. The banks who had shorted the price, would be able to cover their positions very easily as they had driven down the paper price. Where it gets difficult for them is in now the fact that the people on the other side of the trade have become very wise to what they're doing, and they're standing for delivery. And it doesn't matter how far you push the paper price down when you have people standing for delivery. Said another way, in a market that is based upon trust, right? It works until you have people stand for delivery. Most of my career, which is now almost 36 years, no one ever stood for delivery. When I tell you less than 1% of contracts stood for delivery, I'm dead serious. No one stood for delivery. And now they are. And there's a good portion of the market that is challenging the West. These are countries, sovereign wealth funds and central banks of India and Saudi Arabia and Russia and China, and on, that are now standing for delivery. These countries never had any intention to stand for delivery or challenge the West. They're coordinated now, they're motivated, and they smell blood in the water. But what is interesting is you're now seeing the exact same thing happen here in the United States.